Hello guys, welcome to another video. Now that Path of Exile 2's Dawn of the Hunt update is in full swing and we've got the bulk of the emergency hotfixes out of the way, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at how the meta has shaken out now that we're 10 days in. Important to note here is that we're using the week 15 snapshot of patch 0.1 as week 9 is the earliest snapshot, but that one only has data for level 97 to 100 characters, and ideally we want to compare a similar level character range or as close as possible. However, this is of course a more developed meta for patch 0.1 compared to 0.2, but that's as far as we can go back, so that's the data that we have. So immediately with the side-by-side comparison, you can see the drastic shift in the play rate of different Ascendancies. We do of course have the 5 new Ascendancies in patch 0.2, which will go away into diluting the Ascendancy popularity overall, though it's also important to mention that Huntress is an entirely new class and many players want to interact with the new content in an update. Therefore, the play rate of Huntress Ascendancies is likely to be inflated as a result. However, with that said, it's immediately obvious that balance doesn't really exist in terms of Ascendancies in this early phase of Path of Exile 2. Even if Huntress is a new class, with 56% of the share, a single Ascendancy, the Amazon, has over half of the share of the play rate across all Ascendancies in this patch, while the other option for Huntress, the Ritualist, has just 2%. The Amazon is a clear winner for patch 0.2, and if we take a look at those characters in more detail, we can see that 95% of them are using Lightning Spear, a skill that has very quickly become the most used skill in this patch due to its incredible ability to clear packs of monsters. Meanwhile, for single target, those builds are opting to use Stormlance, and that skill is being used on 90% of Amazon builds, and of course, there's Herald of Thunder there too. Now, if we're to compare the Amazon with its 56% Ascendancy share in 0.2 to the Stormweaver, which was the most played Ascendancy in 0.1 with 30%, there's one key difference, and that's the itemization. In fact, powerful builds in 0.1 generally had a lot more reliance on unique items as key components of those builds. For example, 95% of Stormweaver builds were using Ingenuity, 88% were using the Melting Maelstrom, and then you have Against the Darkness and Dream Fragments there, and even these uniques further down, Marzottl's Machination at 38% of Stormweavers, Morior Invictus at 33%, and contrast that back to the Amazon in the current patch, and whilst there are a few outliers still at the top, notably Tangletongue, which is simply a ridiculous item, that one is being used on over half of the Amazon builds, and Lycosidae on about a quarter of those builds. Ingenuity is still there too, but its usage has significantly declined following its nerf, and beyond that you can see that uniques are generally less crucial to these builds. But does that hold true for the patches combined in general? Not just the most played Ascendancies. Well, there's actually even more of a noticeable difference when comparing all of the characters in both patches. You can see just how important those unique items were to the strongest builds in patch 0.1. Ingenuity is used on 90% of the builds, Against the Darkness on 73%, even things like Hand of Wisdom in Action on 42% of builds and Pillar of the Caged God on 32%. Meanwhile, for the current update, the reliance on uniques has dropped sharply. Ingenuity has gone from 90% in patch 0.1 to 34% in 0.2, still a notably used unique but much less dominant. Hand of Wisdom in Action has fallen even further, from 42% in 0.1 to 7% in 0.2, whilst Pillar of the Caged God is one of the biggest losers, from 32% in patch 0.1 to just 0.2% in patch 0.2. That's wild. But why is that the case? Well, Pillar of the Caged God lost the most from this patch, as pretty much all of the builds using this item were also using Hand of Wisdom in Action for the flat damage that it provides, and they're being played on Gemling Legionnaire. All three of these were heavily nerfed, and whilst there's still usage options for Hand of Wisdom in Action and Gemling on different setups, the Pillar of the Caged God was fully reliant on Howler for its flat damage, as there's not many other options for flat damage in PoE2 compared to PoE1, and with all three being nerfed, Pillar took the largest hit as a result. Now let's move back to those Ascendancies for a moment and discuss some non-movers, even after some buffs and nerfs. The Acolyte of Chayula received a minor buff in patch 0.2, but the buff was to the Darkness branch, that's the one that nobody picks, as it removes all of your spirit. And therefore, this Ascendancy once again finds itself at the bottom of the Ascendancy popularity. In fact, it's even down slightly in patch 0.2, likely as a result of the Resolve Darkness cheese for the Trial of the Sekhmet being removed in this patch. Pathfinder and Chronomancer are also there, still near the bottom of Ascendancy popularity even after quite a few changes. All three of those Ascendancies really feel like they don't have their niche carved out just yet. They're mostly utilising similar build options to the more played Ascendancies, but they're just weaker options overall. The Witch Hunter also finds itself there, but what about the biggest winners and losers? By far the biggest loser is the Stormweaver, finding itself with just 0.3% share, down from 30% following the Archmage and mana stacking nerfs. Gemling Legionnaire is also down massively from 24% to just 0.7%, and Invoker is in a similar boat there too. But in terms of winners, the Warbringer, though it only has 2% share in patch 0.2, it is up from 0.4% in patch 0.1, so that's a huge gain there. While the Deadeye, which was already popular in 0.1, has only made gains into 0.2, and once again, it looks like the Deadeye is the superior option for crossbows, and maybe even spears too, especially deep into endgame. And of course, there's the new Ascendancies, all of which have decent entry popularity. We already mentioned the Amazon, which is the most played Ascendancy by far, but there's also the Lich, which is another huge winner of patch 0.2. Now, the Lich finds itself as the one and only spell-based archetype in the top half of Ascendancies, in an absolute sea of attack-based builds, and whilst a good majority of those Lich characters are Chaos Dot builds, this Ascendancy has also positioned itself as the go-to minion class for patch 0.2, with the Infernalist largely falling off, especially following that absolutely bizarre nerf to the Infernal Hound. The Lich has a similar look to item allocation as the Amazon, with Aziri's Disdain being the go-to extreme value unique because of its use case with Eternal Life. Similar to how the Amazon's most played unique is Tangletongue, which is just absurd value. But beyond that, once again, you can see the importance of unique items is a lot lower compared to those meta builds in 0.1. Now, one of the other big winners of this patch is the Smith of Kitava, another new addition and the third and final warrior ascendancy. Like the Lich, the Smith of Kitava finds itself with its own slice of the meta, mostly separate from pretty much everything else, with about half of the builds utilising mace melee setups. And of course, the standout unique for this ascendancy is Inferno class, which has extreme value once again, providing an effective 5% maximum elemental resistances when combined with Forged in Flame. But the Smith of Kitava also has a second highly popular unique, a new unique in patch 0.2, the Deepest Tower. I made a video about this item when they teased it back before the patch, and this is just an incredible helmet for damage in combination with the wheels on the tree that make you deal lots of increased damage to low life enemies. That's a very strong chase item indeed. Now overall, there's some huge meta changes from patch 0.1 to 0.2, but one thing is for sure, there's not really any semblance of balance in Dawn of the Hunt, much like in 0.1. There's wildly overtuned abilities, crazy uniques, very strong ascendancy options, and equally trash ascendancy options. And I expect this will be the case for many patches to come, because there's a lot of new content being added in every patch, and there's just too much going on. Too many variables for GGG to keep track of, which means there is always going to be those extremely imbalanced outliers, at least as we venture through early access. How are you getting on with Dawn of the Hunt? And let me know what you're playing. Are you in that top percent of Amazons, or maybe you're in one of the off-meta Ascendancies? Let me know by commenting below. And thank you for watching this video. As always, stay tuned and stay safe.